Iain McIntyre is an historian, writer and editor of 11 books on a swag of topics, and whose recent publications include Dangerous Visions and New Worlds about radical science fiction and environmental blockades covering the history of the environmental movement. Iain is co-editor of a new anthology, Knocking the Top Off, A People's History of Alcohol in Australia, with a roll call of interesting contributors and ahead of the book's launch this Saturday. At Where Else But the Curtain, the musician and broadcaster joins us now. Iain, welcome to Breakfasters.
G'day.
Now, can you tell us about the scholarly ambitions of Knocking the Top Off? What are you seeking to drill down and expose in a broader sense?
Yeah, look, we wanted to provide, what's known as a people's history of alcohol in Australia and sort of trace from the early days of invasion when alcohol first became like a heavily consumed thing through to the current day and sort of all the different sort of changes economically, socially and so forth. I guess sort of twin thing of the history of alcohol in Australia, but also having this kind of lens on Australian society and history via alcohol. And I guess the idea with a sort of people's history or history from below, as my co-editor Alex often says, it's kind of taking a window on the situation. And so if you're thinking about the alcohol industry, your classic history, top-down history would be kind of look at a beer baron like John Elliott and what did they do, or these days the more kind of faceless corporate people who are running the industry, whereas a people's history kind of looks further down into the factory and who are the workers there, what are they doing, why have they ended up there, and then looks into the back alley and who's drinking out there, or looks through the pub window, not at necessarily the publican, but the people who are doing the drinking. So it's a very much a history from below. It's a history of also marginalised groups. So yeah, that's the kind of take.
You open with Scott Morrison.
Yeah, and we open with Scott Morrison, I guess, because the story of that story, which many people will be familiar with, which was, he went to on holiday during the bushfires, and then the image of him holding a cocktail glass, sort of became a big part of, I guess, his absence, and I guess also the way in which governments had kind of absented themselves from ordinary people's lives and helping them out. But then we kind of juxtapose that with this firefighter who, when asked, do you have a message for Scott Morrison, kind of gave him an abusive spray, and then people got in touch with the local pub and shouted that guy a whole lot of beers, which he then shared with other firefighters. And I suppose that was just an opening story to kind of say, even though alcohol doesn't have quite the same level of involvement in our lives that it did, say, 40 or 50 years ago, there's still this idea around, the person who deserves a drink and the person who doesn't deserve a drink.
Did you earn your cocktail?
Yeah, the unearned cocktail, that still resonates in our society. So even though alcohol perhaps doesn't have the role that it did, it's still, these kind of metaphors and so forth kind of resonate.
What about the 8-hour workday? What's the association with alcohol there?
Yeah, well, so one of the things that became very clear in doing this book is just the centrality of the pub to Australian life, particularly in the 18th and 19th century. So the pub's often the first piece of infrastructure that goes in when a new town or whatever is set up, and it plays all these multiple roles. And so, when the first unions came together, and say in Victoria, which played a leading role in the 8-hour day, people start working for the 8-hour day, there's very few indoor places for people who aren't part of the elites to meet. So they meet in pubs. And so with the 8-hour day, that means those early meetings are in pubs. And so alcohol plays a role there. But then that also shows, I guess, the often vexed role of alcohol, because over time people there's a whole bunch of things going on, the rise of the temperance movement and so forth. But people were like, I don't know if meeting in the pub's a really great idea. We don't seem to be getting much done, and any kind of disagreements, probably get turned up a bit under the influence of alcohol. So the union movement starts to, and also, the money that's being earned in the pub is going to the publican. It's not going back into the movement. So the union movement starts to, develop its own spaces like Trades Hall and so forth. But in that early stages, the Belvedere particularly, that's where unions were meeting. That's where the 8-hour day, the idea for it was formed. And then when they had that first strike in the 1850s and won the 8-hour day, that's where the stonemasons marched to afterwards, was let's celebrate at the Belvedere. And that history of, in terms of unions, a lot of the formal organising moves out of alcohol-based spaces, but a lot of informal organising. People still meet at pubs. We've got a postcard that we're giving, a card that we're giving away with the book at the launch, and that's a cartoon of which I'll have to share with you all. But that's a cartoon of during the 1986 nurses' strike, of nurses drinking in the John Curtin to celebrate what's going on. So it continues to have that sort of role, but again it becomes vexed because as the 8-hour day kind of widens and they start having these annual marches and celebrations which involve tens of thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands of people that kind of become public holiday, this kind of tussle over respectability and so forth starts to kick in. So, the opponents of the 8-hour day are saying, all the workers are going to do is drink, And then some people are saying, well, if that's what they want to do, why not? They work pretty hard. They've been working 12 or 14-hour days. Why can't they have time to drink? But then other parts of the movement are saying, no, that's not what it's about. It's all about, workers are going to are going to self-improve themselves. So, they're very keen not to be associated with kind of people getting on the beers. So, some of the 8-hour day events, not so much in this state, but in some states, they try to make them alcohol-free.
So 60-plus contributors?
I think we've got 20-plus contributors and 67 chapters.
Oh, wow, okay. And as you canvass them all, what cherry-pick some for us that even struck you as surprising or interesting?
Oh, gosh, it's always that favourite child sort of thing. Look, we were really happy to, my co-editor Alex worked with Gary Foley on a chapter about pubs and the Black Power movement, and that was an aspect of Gary's story which hadn't been documented so much before, and that kind of partially covers, I guess, just the role of pubs in terms of people meeting and organising them in the 70s. Covers some of the negative sides of alcohol for the movement, and it also covers, I guess, that kind of struggles, which is something that kind of recurs in Australian life over access to alcohol in the pubs. So, Aboriginal people were banned from many pubs. They were banned from drinking altogether at different times. Women were segregated in pubs, if not banned altogether. You couldn't have music in pubs at times. In the 30s in Melbourne, it was, illegal to have a dance within 100 metres of a, somewhere that sold alcohol. You couldn't consume alcohol within 100 metres of a dance. So you've got this sort of push and pull. So that chapter's pretty interesting. I think the one about the woolshed kiss-in, which same-sex kiss-in, can't get into the details, but Graham Willett's
nice teaser.
Written a couple of great ones. We also cover the sort of rise of punk and the role of community radio station 4ZZZ in kind of creating a kind of pub circuit in Brisbane. And
the launch as well. You mentioned Gary Foley. Will Gary be at the launch?
Yeah, so we've got the launch this Saturday at 4 p.m. That's the 9th of December at the John Curtin Hotel. And yeah, we've got Gary Foley speaking, Julie Kimber from the Melbourne Labour History Society, Jeff Sparrow, who'd be known to Breakfasters, and myself, and a whole lot of our contributors will be there as well.
Just strikes me as, well, even COVID and the Dan Murphy opening hours and getting on the beers and something from the top shelf, it is just ubiquitous, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, alcohol continues to have, a huge role, and yeah, this book tries to look at that kind of positive, negative, indifferent. How's it been shaped by our economy, our culture?
But its mythic status in the culture.
Yep, we certainly cover that, and at times, I guess the falseness of that, much of that mythos.
Knocking the Top Off is the wonderful title of the book, A People's History of Alcohol in Australia. It's edited by Alex Ettling and our guest Iain McIntyre. The launch of the book is 4 p.m. this Saturday at the John Curtin, the bottom of Lygon Street in Carlton. And Iain McIntyre, it's been a great pleasure to have you in.
Yeah, thank you.